back. Of course, Christian apologetics is one of the great topics that we get a lot of requests for here on the Dove radio and television networks, and one of the top items that we air. I am really honored to have with us today Daniel Buttafouco. He is a nationally recognized trial attorney, Christian apologist, and the founder of Historical Bible Society. He's the author of Consider the Evidence and Unapologetic, Clear Answers to Tough Bible Questions, a trial lawyer's guide to winning people, not just arguments. Those are some of the writings. He does have a website, 1-800-NOW-HURT. Yes, that's the website, 1-800-NOW-HURT.com. Check it out. Daniel, what an honor to have you, sir. How are you?
How are you? It's an honor to be here, Perry. God bless.
Bless you. Where are you? Where are we getting you from?
I'm in New York. Could you imagine God is using New York trial lawyers to spread and defend the gospel? That's how desperate it's getting.
That's wonderful. Good. Hang in there. We need you, buddy. That's great. Wow. Okay, so trial lawyer to apologist. Tell us the story.
All right, well, I've been trying personal injury and medical malpractice cases for over 40 years. I wrote the national test for the National Board of Trial Advocacy. I've got over 175 settlements for $1 million or more. And in 2008, I got my master's degree in apologetics at Alliance Theological Seminary. And I've been defending the faith because I got into an argument about 30 years ago with a fellow trial lawyer about God and the Bible, and I felt like I did a lousy job. So I determined to learn this the way I learned my craft. And since then, I've been demolishing arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God and contending for the faith, as it says in Jude.
Wow. Now, you refer to the Bible as contemporaneous notes. Explain that.
Well, the Bible is really written by, well, let's talk about the New Testament. The New Testament is written by eyewitnesses, and it's often criticized as being written later. It's often criticized as not being written by who it says it's written. These are all nonsensical arguments that are made by modern skeptics. The actual facts are that the New Testament was written entirely before 70 AD. There are technical reasons for this, but the most important reason is that it was written entirely before the destruction of the Jewish temple. And we could unpack that, but it would take a long time. The fact of the matter is the traditional descriptions of authorship are correct, and they were eyewitnesses. They say they were eyewitnesses. Peter says we're not followers of cleverly invented fables, but we were eyewitnesses. John writes, that which we've handled, that which we touched, that which we've experienced, this we declare to you. In the book of Acts, it says these men have been, they took note of them, that these men had been with Jesus. And Paul says, writing not too much later, he said, over 500 people to the resurrection that are witnesses, most of whom are still living, which means this was written very early. And so that's really important. And as a trial lawyer, the idea of eyewitness testimony appeals to me greatly because you cannot win a case without the testimony of eyewitnesses.
Well, as a trial lawyer, you're glad to have one, but here in the Bible, you got four.
You got even more than that if you count the people that Luke witnessed, interviewed, that witnessed things, and there's so many other proofs in the Bible. And so I try to unpack that in very easily accessible writings that are aimed to the everyday person. I'm not writing a scholarly tome. There's too much of that out there. Nobody reads it. I got to get it into the hands of the average person so that the plumber can tell his fellow plumber when he says the Bible's a book of fairy tales, he could explain why that's absolute nonsense. It's not. It's a factual, historical account.
So what do you do in your apologetics when somebody says, I need evidence, and yet they discredit or just kind of abandon the biblical evidence of it?
Well, why would you do that? I mean, all right, it's written by people who were believers, but if you experience what they experienced, you'd be a believer as well. We have a jury instruction in the trial practice law which says that interested witnesses could testify. You just have to take that into consideration. And in matrimonial cases, as I point out, often the only people testifying are interested witnesses, the husband and the wife. And yet we could still find truth in that. Listen, these people were cross-examined to death under torture for their testimony. And we might wonder why God allowed that to happen. But 2,000 years later, we know why. Because some atheist, some skeptic would say, well, we can't trust them. Yeah, we can trust them. Because none of them recanted. None of the stories unraveled. And there was literally no reason to be a Christian in the first century in ancient Rome unless you believed it was true, because all you got for it was grief, torture, confiscation of goods, and you got to be martyred. So there's very good reasons for accepting the eyewitness accounts of the New Testament.
What if Christianity was put under trial today under the rules of jurisprudence, would it survive?
Absolutely. In fact, Simon Greenleaf, who was the founder of Harvard Law School and a professor of evidence, actually made that statement. And so, yes, people say things like, I battle on Quora all the time with knuckleheads who have no idea what they're talking about. And they say things like, the Bible is a claim, it's not evidence. So my answer is to them, what do you know about evidence? I live in evidence. I work with evidence daily. You ever read Federal Rule of Evidence 803? There's about 40 exceptions to the hearsay rule. And so they say, well, it's hearsay. Well, first of all, we use hearsay all the time in court. It just has certain rules that you have to abide by. Hearsay could be great evidence. There are all kinds of exceptions to the hearsay rule. Declarations that are made under pressure, declarations that are made in real time, past recollections recorded, ancient documents. I could go on. So there's no doubt that the Bible, the biblical record, the 27 books of the New Testament were meant to be evidence for the faith. They are recorded testimony of eyewitnesses to the earliest miracles and the life, death, resurrection of Christ. You can believe them.
How do you handle, as an apologist and a trial lawyer, the continuing battle between creation and evolution?
Well, listen, first of all, the cosmological argument to me is very strong. How did something come from nothing? Prior to the discovery of the Hubble telescope, we'd have people like Carl Sagan and, the neo-atheists saying things like, well, the universe is all there is, all there ever was, and all there ever shall be. Well, that's been conclusively proven to be wrong. We now know through the Big Bang Theory and the observations made by the Hubble telescope that the universe is expanding from a point of singularity, which proves that it had a beginning. And so once you know it had a beginning, it's not eternal. And if it's not eternal, it had a beginning, that means it had to have something that caused it. So you have this endless regression. So what caused the thing that caused that? And what caused the thing that caused that? The only possible explanation is supernatural. That is, there's a creator, God, always, as has been maintained by theologians, that has existed throughout eternity, is a self-caused being, has no beginning and no end, who created all that exists and all that we observe. It's the only sensible explanation, like it or not. People don't want to listen or believe in the supernatural. Well, look, I can't help you. The natural world is not all there is. Even the Beatles knew that there was something more to life than just the physical, right? There are things that the physical world and science cannot explain. There's a spiritual component to life, and anybody with half a brain knows this.
Is science more and more yielding to intelligent design?
Yes, slowly but surely, we are finding out that science supports the Bible, archaeology supports the Bible. The greatest scientific minds that ever lived were biblical Christians, people like Isaac Newton, Galileo, Copernicus. I mean, you could go on. Isaac Watts. These were believers. Throughout history, science is only possible, actually, because it has a biblical worldview. It's built on the premise that there's an ordered world which God created, and that he's given man the ability to explore it, utilize it, use, and not abuse it. So you can't even have modern science without a biblical worldview, which is why, by the way, that Western civilization is the most advanced civilization that has ever existed, because we are built firmly on 2,000 years of biblical, foundation. It's part and parcel of Western civilization, the Bible. And now people want to move away from it, which is insanity, and we get the predictable results.
So how do you handle Christian persecution today?
Well, I'm very involved in this, actually. I support a group called Families Set Free. There's over 2 million people currently, Christians mostly, currently enslaved in Pakistan in brick kilns. We've lobbied the UK Parliament. We've lobbied other groups, the US government. And slowly but surely, we're making this known to the world. You know, Christian persecution has been a fact of the Christian experience since day one. I believe it was Tertullian who said that the blood of the martyrs are the seeds of the church. The church does well under persecution because it's forced to turn to God and not to its own devices. But yet it's sad. And what's going on in Nigeria right now is absolutely awful. It's despicable. We have jihadists that are wantonly killing Christians. These maniacs are going into churches and burning down buildings and hacking up babies, and no one talks about it. But it's a problem, and it's always going to be a problem. It's the nature of being a Christian to be persecuted. Jesus said we have to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us.
The gospel deals with the gospel writers having the eyewitness experience of being with Christ. Today, Jesus isn't walking the earth. What we have is our personal relationship with Christ. Shouldn't that be the most compelling evidence of witnessing?
Well, yeah, I mean, you always have your testimony. I certainly have my own testimony as how God worked in my life. But the problem with your personal testimony is that it's very subjective. People will say things like, well, that's good for you. But there is an objective truth to the faith that is undeniable. And every Christian needs to be able to defend that and understand why we believe what we believe. One of my missions, and I speak to children, I speak to adults, I go in churches, I go in schools, and I find that there's this huge hunger for people, especially young people, to want to understand why we believe the Bible. You know, somebody handed them a Bible, a well-meaning adult, a grandparent, a parent, and said, this is the word of God. Happened to me. Believe it, build your life on it. But they don't explain why we believe this. And the more intelligent kids are going to question it. And then when they go to college, they get talked out of it because they only have the personal testimony. They only have what we would call the Holy Spirit experience in the youth group, the praise and worship experience, the emotional experience. But God is a spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And if you don't know the truth of why we believe these things, it's just like me going into courtroom. I may have the most compelling case, an injured person who needs help, that's in a wheelchair, his life is destroyed, but I can't get up in front of that jury and say, my client's a good guy, give him $20 million because he needs the rest of his life to live on. I have to give them evidence as to why they should do it. I have to tell them the defendant caused this injury, and here's why. This is what the law is. These are the facts of the case. This is what I'm proving. And he's a good guy. And he deserves the money. And then that's how I win cases. And that's how we're going to win hearts as well.
Daniel, you're fascinating. I want to get you back. But one quick last question. When you lead somebody to the Bible, where do you ask them to start reading?
I always tell people to start in the New Testament because the Old Testament concealed is the New Testament revealed. The Old Testament for Christians is basically for history and for context. Everything in the Bible, old and new, points to Jesus. And so if you start with the New Testament reading with Matthew, it'll take you 33 hours to read the New Testament from start to finish. And then you can always go back and supplement that knowledge with relevant quotes and citations from the Old Testament, which support the New.
Fascinating. Where can people get your books?
Well, they're on Amazon. One is called Unapologetic. One is called Consider the Evidence. I make no money from this. My desire is to encourage people to believe the Bible.
All right, check it out online, and his website is 1-800-NOW-HURT, HURT.com. There's a picture of that landing page there. Daniel, you're fascinating. Can we get you back?
I would love to be back. This is my mission.
Okay, thank you, sir. God bless you. Have a great day.
God bless you, Perry. Thank you.